Hi, I'm Tom from Migot Photography, and today I'm going to reveal why and how I got to get this paper. So for the past couple of years, I've been thinking of taking the Photoshop Adobe Certified exam, but I never got around it. Just not enough time and other commitments. And it's only when I was about to leave Adobe last summer, 2016, that I said to myself, actually, I should buy a couple of vouchers to pass the exam. The reason why I thought at that time was because as an Adobe employee, I was going to pay a lot less to attempt the exam. Bear in mind that if you want to attempt the exam, it costs you $180. Whether or not you fail, if you try, each attempt will cost you $180. So it's quite expensive to do that. So I thought, well, let's do it. Let's take the vouchers. And why two? First is because I thought I was going to do the Lightroom certification exam as well. Without much preparation, I thought it was going to be a joke, but I would do it. It would be fun. Little did I know that several months later, in December 2016, Adobe would retire the Lightroom certification program. So at that time I said to myself, well, it's not a big deal. I've got now 2 more chances to pass the Photoshop certification exam. And before I dive into how I prepare myself and what's in the exam itself, let me explain you why I really wanted to undertake this certification. I think it's for 2 reasons really. The first one is that I've been using Photoshop for over 10 years now, and it was a way to prove to myself that I kind of know what I'm talking about when it comes to Photoshop. But more importantly, it's because I've been teaching photography and doing workshops around Photoshop, and I'm going to be doing more workshops around Photoshop, and I thought this was a great thing to something that would add more legitimacy to my teaching. So that's why I did it. And lastly, there's actually a third point, which was that I knew that although I was using Photoshop for many years, I had a tendency of always doing the same task in Photoshop, and that meant that, and now I know that I was using about 30% of the potential of Photoshop. And so by undertaking the certification, I will really deep dive into Photoshop and discover more techniques, more features of the tool that would improve my own image retouching skills. And these are really the 3 reasons why I wanted to do it. And so the exam itself, what is it? Well, it's basically a computer-based exam. So you got to take an appointment with Pearson VUE. Pearson VUE is an Adobe partner. They facilitate the exams, not only for Photoshop, and I should mention as well that the Adobe Certified Expert exam does not only exist for Photoshop or for the creative products. It actually works for a bunch of other products within the Adobe solutions. And it always being facilitated by Pearson VUE. So they have offices all over the world. I believe they train as well as letting you do the exam. And the exam consists of 57 questions covering 11 topics, and I'm going to go through them in a minute. And although all this exam takes place on the computer, you do not have a copy of Photoshop running at the same time. So you're really entering all these questions blindly, which, trust me, it's extremely difficult. And clearly, the exam does not represent real life usage of Photoshop. Let's be clear. The exam itself will not judge you on your ability to be a great creative or great artist with Photoshop. It will not make you a greater artist either. It doesn't judge your skill with Photoshop. The exam will only judge you upon your knowledge of Photoshop. And that's very important to understand this. And so going through the topics, you have them here on the screen. There's 11 of them. And first start with starting the project in Photoshop, and I'm not going to go into the sub-levels, but basically navigate and customize the user interface. use the tools and tool settings, so all the tools that you have in Photoshop, you know, like selection tools, paintbrush, and so on. Create work with layers. So obviously Photoshop is a tool that really relies on layers, so you need to understand what layers are and how to use them efficiently. And then finally, modify image dimension. That makes sense. Apply global tone and color adjustment to images. And also local adjustment to images. Work with filters as well. This is a great feature inside Photoshop. Use pixel and vector-based tools. We tend to forget that you can do some vector-based work inside Photoshop, so it's important to know how and what you can do. Knowing how to create selections, and finally getting your images out of Photoshop. So these are the 11 topics that you could, and it's very important to understand, is that you could be questioned on. It doesn't mean that in the exam itself all the topics will be covered, but you will not have any question asked outside the scope of those 10 topics here. So that helps you narrowing down your preparation in a way, but that it's pretty broad anyway. So I mentioned a number of questions, 57, and you need to, in order to pass, you need to have 63% success. And it's not easy at all. You have 90 minutes to complete the exam, and the rules are pretty strict when you go to the examination room. They even have lockers because you're not allowed to bring any notes with you, which is obvious. You cannot take your phone with you. You cannot have a watch. You cannot even wear a watch with you. You cannot have any food with you, any drinks at all. They will give you a notepad, which is kind of it's an erasable notepad. They can wipe it out afterwards, kind of a whiteboard type of notepad. They give it to you when you enter and they take it back afterwards. So there's no way for you to bring in and out any notes of the exam and the questions you've been asked. And as a matter of fact, before undertaking the exam, they make you sign some kind of confidentiality agreement about the questions inside the exam. So then how did I prepare? Because, you know, my first idea was that I was going to have a whole year to prepare for the certification, and it wasn't the case. It wasn't, because by the end of May, I realized that actually I only have about a month before I'm leaving the country, because I'm about to leave to Lithuania for a month. And so that didn't give me much time. And so I basically decided that I would book a first appointment for the exam on the 8th of June. And the reason why I said the 8th of June is because I could not book a second one just in case. I had to wait to pass the exam, fail it, and book a second attempt. So I said to myself, well, if I book it on the 8th of June, when I fail, because at that time my mind was set on failure, when I fail, then I go back home and I book the second appointment, and I should have enough time to book it. I've got about 2 weeks before I leave the country, so that should be fine. And so the 8th of June, that was basically a week from that moment where I said to myself, actually, I need to work. I really need to revise now. And I went online and tried to figure out how I could prepare for the exam the best. And you've got a couple of options. Well, I would say 3 options really. First off, you need to bear in mind that when you look at the prerequisite for the exam, Adobe tell you need to have between 2 and 5 years experience with the tool and so on, which I reckon it's true, but then it all depends on you, how much you use Photoshop. If you've been using Photoshop for a year, but you use it absolutely every single day, and you tend to do a multitude of tasks inside Photoshop, then, you know, feel free to go for the exam. You may as well succeed. But on another hand, you can be using the tool for 10 years like I've done, and always using doing the same task, and so you don't know much about the tool. And so I looked online, and there was 3 ways to prepare. The first one was the hard way, which was basically going through all the help files, because there's no secret. The exam questions are based on the help files of Photoshop. So if you read all of them, and you absorb all of them, then you should succeed. However, we're counting about hundreds of pages with tons of subtleties in each one of them, which would make the task extremely difficult, and it would not train you at the type of question you would get. You would only get the knowledge, but trust me, that does not prepare you to the exam itself, and I'll get to it in a second. Then the other option is to take a course. There are a few courses out there online that basically prepare you for the exam, and the way they do it is that the course is covering the 11 topics that I've just mentioned, and then in between courses you get some quizzes, and I've done one. So I've taken the course that was done by a guy called Martin Hypniak. I'm sorry if I not pronouncing the name correctly. And the detail of the course, by the way, is in the blog article, and the link is up here and also in the description. So I took his course and I was really great, but the certification that I did was for Photoshop CC 2015. And his course was made for Photoshop CC, so a few years ago. So there was not that the features changed dramatically in Photoshop, but the way they designed the certification exam is that they will ask you a lot about the basic function, or the primary function of Photoshop, as well as a focus on the new features inside Photoshop. So there were a few things inside Martin's course that were not relevant, such as Behance, for example. That was no longer relevant to the exam. But I did it, and I liked the course how it was made. I liked the fact that there was quizzes, and I took all of them, and I did them several times. But one thing to me was that I didn't want to rely on a single source to revise. So I found online a tool made by Exameds, and Exameds seem to be pretty popular in creating those tools, and I'm going to show it to you in a second. Because although this is not an endorsement of Examed, but it is clear that I would not have succeeded, I would not have passed the exam on my first attempt, in especially having only a week to prepare, if I didn't use Examed. So let me show you what Examed is really. It's similar to when you want to revise for your driving test, the theory one. You know those computer-based program that you can run and it helps you to learn, and basically it's a mock exam. Well, that's basically what Examed is. And so the good news is that I got a copy of Examed that was exactly the certification that I was doing, the same version, 2015. So that was great. So let me open the program here. And by the way, I bought the program, right? So here it's loading. It exists on PC, it exists on Mac, and it exists also for Illustrator and a bunch of other Adobe Certified Expert exam. And the way it works is that you basically have three modes. You have a study mode, which is the one that we're in now. And this basically enables you to kind of play. You basically assess your, you answer the questions, you basically select an answer, and I'm just going to go randomly. I'm not even looking at the question here. And you can click the answer here, and you can see where you go wrong, where you go right, and you can actually see some information that will help you understand and learn. And this is what this is really where the greatest value of this tool, because it's a subset of what you have inside the help file, and you have a hyperlink here to go directly to the Adobe help file, which mention exactly the point of that question. So you can go through all the question, and that's great. That's the study mode. You can also check, select the topic you want to cover. And if you start at the beginning, well, you can go through all of them. You've got a practice as well. The practice mode is really a mock exam. So as you can see, you will have a certain amount of time to do it, and you have 57 questions, and you go through all of them, and you will not know whether you answered correctly or not. With slight exception is that you can see here the status, which is not something that I quite liked, because on the day of the exam you have no idea about the status. You don't know as you go through the exam, you don't know if you did good or not. Here, that kind of gives you an indication of whether or not you've been doing good or not. And to set the practice, you can go to the settings here. So I'm going to exit this. And in the settings, you basically have all the topics here, and you can see all the questions. The tool, I believe, has about 360 questions. So that's quite a big pool of questions, especially given that the exam, you're going to be asked only 57. So it's good. It enables you to practice and get quite a good variety of questions. And you can select which topics you want to include in the practice exam that you're going to run. And you can also define how many questions you want in the exam. So when I started, I focused on one topic at a time. And for example, when I started, I did the start project in Photoshop, and I went through the 23 questions. So I would put 23 questions instead of 5. And then once I would pass this one, then I would do the second one, but I will still do the first one as well. So I did it incrementally. And so by the time, like the day before the exam, I remember doing about 3 tests, and that was the 360 question each time. And it's important to understand that the questions that are in the quiz from a course that you would take online, or the questions you have here on the Examed, these are not the questions you're going to get exactly in the exam, because the questions in the exams are confidential. But they will cover all the topics you will be asked on, and given the pool of questions, even if they tell you do not learn the questions, but you're bound to remember them. You're bound to remember the questions, you're bound to remember the answers. And that's not a problem, because on the day of the exam, you get a question on a theme or a topic or a certain feature inside Photoshop that you may struggle and figure out what the answer is, but you remember there was a question in the mock test, and you remember what the question was and what the answer was, and from that it helps you finding the right answer during the exam. So it's very useful, even if you not learn but remember all these questions. And finally, the last mode, which I honestly did not use, is the review. And the review is basically kind of a cheat sheet of all the questions. You see, I said 360. In fact, it was 350 questions. So you basically go through each of them, and you can see, without taking the test, you can see which one is right, which one is wrong, and why the answer is the way it is. So I love Examed. I've been in contact with them afterwards because, first off, I wanted to give my feedback on the tool. There were a few questions that they asked among the 350, which puzzled me. One was wrong. Well, a couple of them were not necessarily wrong, but misleading and not very precise. And so I just thought that it was a bit tricky to get a right answer. It was a bit like a flip of a coin. So they really appreciated my feedback, and they actually took on board what I said and sent me a copy of the new questions that I wanted to readjust, and there were about 3 or 4, and I validated them, and I was pleased to be part of it, to help them with that, because they helped me a lot. And the tool itself costs £70, so it's not that big of a deal really to prepare the exam. So one thing to bear in mind is that I've mentioned earlier that you don't have a copy of Photoshop running while you do the exam, and that's already not really real life scenario, right? Unless you could say, well, yeah, but what if you work for Adobe in the support team and you try to help somebody over the phone, you don't see their screen? Yes, but you would have your own copy of Photoshop and you would actually see the screen in front of you. And trust me, for having worked in the support organization at Adobe for 10 years, I kind of know how things are done, and you would not do it blindly. So the exam in that respect is not real life representative. However, my biggest problem with the exam itself is with the questions. The questions are clearly not, they are tricky. They're not here, as I said earlier, they're not here to judge whether you're a great artist with Photoshop. They're here to judge how much you know about Photoshop, the interface, the intricacity of the interface. As an example, they're not going to ask you how to open a new layer. They may ask you, we want to open a new layer, how can you do? And then it's going to be multiple choices, and multiple answer will be correct. And they will say, well, you can use the menu. You can also do a right click. They're going to ask you if you can do a right click. They can ask you if you can open a new layer from the contextual menu of the layout panel. They're going to ask you if you need to press a key like Command, Control, Alt, Option on your keyboard while you hit the icon on the layers panel. And there's a bunch of questions like this where you may have one answer correct, but they want all of them correct. And sometimes it's very tricky because they're going to ask you, okay, to do this task, do you need to press Shift plus that command, or do you need to press Alt Shift or Alt Control Shift, and that is where it gets very confusing, because when you do things, you may never use shortcuts. Shortcuts are great, but there's thousands of them, I would say, in Photoshop. So you're not going to remember all of them. You're going to remember the one that you do all the time. And maybe you're not someone who likes shortcuts. You like to use menus, or you tend to always access a specific feature using a contextual menu, but you don't know exactly what the path would be if you were to use the menu. So it's a lot of tricky questions like that. They even trick you, like for example, there's a question that's going to ask you, you want to place a document that it's in Bridge and you want to place it in Photoshop, in your Photoshop document. How are you going to do this? Are you going to drag and drop the document? Are you going to do File, Place in Photoshop, or File, Place, or File, Place / link in Photoshop? They're going to give you a bunch of options like this, and they're all aimed at confusing you. This is where we can argue about the relevance of the tool. However, back to the goal as to why I did it in the first place, it helps you really go inside out in the tool, and once you pass, well, suddenly it gives you some confidence that you know the tool very well. You know where everything is. You might not be the best at using all the tools, all the features, but you know where they are, and if you need to do an action, a specific task, you will know where to start, and that's important. So what I'd like to know is whether you would be interested. Have you actually tried any certification, whether it's Photoshop or Lightroom maybe when it was, or even Illustrator? I'm actually thinking of learning Illustrator and maybe undertake the test in a year or two. So I'd like to know what you think, and if you haven't done that, is it something that you'd be interested in doing? So let me know that in the comment section, whether on YouTube or in the blog article. And until then, this is Tom Migot saying, if you like it, well, capture it and use Photoshop afterwards. Cheers.